The cold, vast darkness of space had seen countless battles over millennia, from star systems to galactic borders. Empires had risen and fallen, their wars fought with overwhelming firepower, advanced technology, and superior numbers. But this battle, the one humanity was about to wage, would be different. No one expected the tactic the humans were about to unleash. The Cutters, as they were called, were a myth to most of the galaxy. A ghost story whispered among enemy ranks about elite human soldiers who fought in ways that defied logic, soldiers who could change the tide of battle without warning. But to the Galactic Coalition, the mighty alliance of alien races that had long viewed humanity as inferior, the Cutters were nothing more than a ridiculous rumor. After all, how could an underdog species like humans compete with the advanced technology of the galaxy's most powerful forces? They were about to find out. The battle at the Kasari Nebula was meant to be a decisive show of force. The Galactic Coalition had deployed an overwhelming fleet of warships, dozens of massive cruisers, destroyers, and dreadnoughts, armed with the latest in shield technology and weaponry. Their goal was simple: to crush the human forces once and for all and end the growing resistance that humanity had sparked across the galaxy. On the bridge of the Zephyrian Hammer, Admiral Thrax of the Coalition stood tall, his reptilian features sharp and imposing. His red eyes gleamed with confidence as he reviewed the holographic display of the battlefield. The human fleet, significantly smaller and outgunned, hovered in the distance, waiting for the inevitable assault. "Prepare to engage," Thrax growled. "Let's show these humans that their rebellion ends here." As the Coalition fleet moved into position, a strange signal appeared on Thrax's display. It was faint, almost imperceptible, but it was there, something moving fast through the Kasari Nebula. Thrax narrowed his eyes. "What is that?" "Admiral, it's unclear," one of his officers stammered. "It's a distortion in the nebula, but it's moving too erratically to be a ship." Thrax grunted. "Ignore it. Focus on the human fleet. Prepare all weapons." But as the fleet prepared to fire, the distortion grew larger. And then, without warning, the human ships vanished from the Coalition's sensors. The entire fleet, gone. "What just happened?" Thrax snapped, his voice filled with disbelief. "We've lost contact with the human ships, Admiral," another officer reported. "They've disappeared from our scanners." Thrax's eyes narrowed. "Impossible. No species has the technology to cloak an entire fleet. Find them, now." The officers scrambled to recalibrate the sensors, but before they could, the Coalition's ships began to shake. A faint tremor rippled through the Zephyrian Hammer, and the Admiral felt a deep rumble beneath his feet. "Admiral, we're detecting something inside the hull," an officer shouted, panic rising in his voice. Thrax's blood ran cold as the realization hit him. Boarding parties? The answer came too late. Suddenly, alarms blared throughout the Coalition fleet. Small, nearly invisible vessels had latched onto the hulls of the massive dreadnoughts and cruisers, ships so small they had evaded the most advanced sensors. They weren't battleships, they weren't bombers, they were cutters. Inside the Zephyrian Hammer, a small team of human soldiers, clad in sleek, black suits that allowed them to blend into the shadows, moved with precision and deadly efficiency. The cutters were specialists, trained to infiltrate and disable enemy ships from the inside. They didn't fight with overwhelming firepower. They fought with sabotage, stealth, and surgical strikes. At the head of the team was Captain Emma Hayes, a seasoned cutter with countless successful missions under her belt. Her voice was calm as she spoke to her squad through the comms. "Target the reactor and the weapons systems. Move fast. We don't need to destroy the ship, we just need to cripple it." The cutters worked in silence, moving through the massive corridors of the dreadnought like shadows. They planted small, high-tech charges on critical systems, reactors, power cores, shield generators, then disappeared before the Coalition forces even realized what was happening. In the command center of the Zephyrian Hammer, chaos erupted as systems began to fail. Consoles flickered, alarms screamed, and the massive ship began to lose power. "Admiral, our shields are down. Power is fluctuating across the entire ship," an officer yelled. Thrax clenched his fists, his eyes wide with fury. "What is happening? Find the intruders." But it was too late. The cutters had already done their work, slipping out of the ship the same way they had entered, unseen, undetected. Across the battlefield, similar scenes played out. Coalition warships, once thought invincible, were crippled from within by the cutters. Engines failed, weapons systems went offline, and shields collapsed. One by one, the Coalition fleet fell into disarray, their massive warships left vulnerable and defenseless. In the distance, the human fleet reappeared, ready to strike. Unlike the Coalition's advanced war machines, the human ships were built for mobility and flexibility. They weren't designed to stand toe-to-toe with dreadnoughts, but now, they didn't have to. As the human fleet moved in, they launched a precise and coordinated attack on the Coalition's crippled ships. The once overwhelming force of the Coalition was reduced to a chaotic scramble for survival. On the bridge of the Zephyrian Hammer, Admiral Thrax watched in horror as his fleet was decimated. "Retreat! We need to regroup," he shouted. But there was no regrouping. The human fleet, now emboldened by the success of the cutters, pressed their advantage. The Coalition forces, once so sure of their victory, were routed. Back aboard the human flagship Resolute, Captain Emma Hayes watched the battlefield from a secure vantage point. The mission had been a success. The cutters had proven once again that brute force wasn't always the answer. Sometimes, the best victories came from unconventional tactics. Admiral Kyle Reeves, commander of the human fleet, approached her with a nod of approval. "Impressive work, Captain. They never saw it coming." Emma smiled faintly. "That's the point, sir. They expected us to fight their way, but humans, we always find another way." Reeves chuckled. "That's what makes us dangerous, isn't it? The galaxy thought they had us figured out. They still don't," Emma replied, her gaze hardening as she looked out at the wreckage of the Coalition fleet. "And they never will." The battle at the Kasari Nebula would go down in history as a turning point in the war. The Galactic Coalition had learned a harsh lesson. Humanity wasn't just a species of warriors, they were tacticians, innovators willing to fight in ways no one else could imagine. And now, with the cutters leading the way, the galaxy would never underestimate them again.